I'm so glad that you've joined us. My name is Brian Bennett, and I am the founder of Multiply Leaders. And what I'm about to share with you in the time that we have ahead is lessons that I have learned in my own leadership and in my study of leadership and in watching gifted leaders around me as when it comes to their weekly planning. And particularly for ministry leaders. Now, if you're not a ministry leader, I believe that what we're going to be sharing is going to be very valuable to you as well. And I believe it's applicable in business, it's applicable in nonprofit leadership, and even just in self leadership in general as you think about planning your week and leading your life to the fullest. We're going to be focusing in on finding clarity in the chaos of ministry. And as I've led as a pastor for the past 11 years, I've found myself many times to be experiencing a chaos that challenged me in my leadership. And sometimes I responded to the chaos well, other times I didn't respond well. And I can think of three particular times that I've experienced burnout because I didn't lead myself well when it came to my weekly planning. I can think of other times where I don't think the ministry area that lead and have led was as fruitful as it could be because it was scattered in its focus because I didn't know how to integrate the vision of the ministry into the weekly and daily planning. So that's why I want to share with you some significant shifts that have really helped to unlock my potential as a leader, and I believe will be helpful and will give you some very practical tools during time. Who is Multiply Leaders? We are a coaching and resourcing organization that is passionate about helping leaders unlock their potential in the name of Jesus. We provide many different various facets of coaching for self leadership, team leadership, weekly planning, preaching, coaching. We come alongside and help you unlock your potential through coaching in Jesus' name. But we also have resources that we write and develop from our blog to books that we've developed and other resources like the planner that I'll tell you about at the end of our time. Where are we going in this webinar? In the short time that we have together, we will give you actionable steps. That's a promise I'm going to make to you. What we talk about in this time is going to be actionable. It's going to be something that you can take and put right into your weekly plan to plug right in to your calendar that will help you discover clarity. I think that's extremely important that we have clarity because clarity is empowering to our leadership and to our heart and to our life, and that get organized and thrive in your weekly planning. So some big promises there, but I believe the information that I'm going to be sharing with you is going to really be powerful. And if there's one or two things that you walk away with that help you thrive as a leader, I think it will be well worth it. Here's my question for you. Do you feel overwhelmed with all of the phone calls, all of the meetings, all of the requests, the projects, the events, and the responsibilities? Now, I know many of us on this call have different roles. We might be a senior leader, we might be a team player, we might be at the beginning of our journey, we might be at towards the end of our vocational journey. We might be in business world, nonprofit, we might be an entrepreneur, we might be a ministry leader, which is my context. No matter what context you're in, I know that in the pace of our culture that many of us feel overwhelmed with all the phone calls, all of the requests, all of the inputs, the different inputs that we have coming our way. And as I thought about the challenges of this, here's what came to mind is that ministry is constant. Now, if you're not in ministry, substitute that for whatever line of field of work you're in. Business, it's constant. But for me as a ministry leader, it never ends. I get texts at night, I get phone calls first thing in the morning. You never get to a completion point because ministry is about people. And this side of heaven, that's just not going to be finished. God's mission is not finished this side of his kind of renewal, the new creation. So ministry is constant. Not only is ministry constant, but life is constant. Right? Life is ongoing. The family things that are happening, the relationships in our home, the struggles that we have financially, or the joys, the successes. Life is constant as well. So we have our ministry, our vocational focuses, but we also have our life focuses, which might mean a spouse for some of us. It might mean children. It might mean friendship, recreation, hobbies. Those things are constant as well. And then we have things like pain and frustration, which are huge, and they impact our week. They impact the way that we plan our week. They impact the way that we execute our week and the way that we live and lead with hope and energy and a fullness, or we lead with from first gear instead of fifth gear, right? We lead deflated. We lead with bitterness or with deep frustration that is just gone unresolved. That's not a place we want to stay in. Pain and frustration are inevitable, but there's a healthy way that we can respond to them, and there's an unhealthy way that we can respond to them. But those are challenges that challenge our weekly planning. There's multiple forms of input. Think of texting and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, notes from meetings, voicemails, right? We're constantly getting inputs into our day. We're constantly getting information from a wide range of people. We all know we've never been more wired in than we currently are. And there's a real plus to that, but there's also a real downside to that. For many of us, we're too wired in. I have a hard time sometimes unplugging, or I find myself going to my phone to check something because I'm so used to that. I built that habit in so much because I'm constantly getting inputs from others in those social media sectors, and it's just easy for that to become almost an addiction in our lives. For some of us, the challenge is we can't close the open loops in our head. I've heard this a few years ago and I thought it was very helpful. I can't remember the source, but when we don't get the thoughts out of our heads, they keep into an open loop, meaning they're constantly circling. So if we don't trust our system, if we don't have a system where we're keeping track and keeping organized, then that's going to result in open loops in our head. And as long as those open loops are turning, it's going to take energy from us. It's going to burn time in our mind. And it's going to cause greater anxiety. I believe that was from David Allen and his excellent resources on organization. And lastly is we lack the right tools. We use multiple systems like notepads and planners and electronic tools, but we don't have one tool that captures everything. And sometimes it's not a matter of the tool, it's a matter of discipline, is that we have sticky notes and we have a pad of paper and we have our planner and we have our electronic devices, but that spreads that out over multiple places, and that goes back to those open loops because we can't fully trust if we use multiple tools and kind of aren't disciplined, or we don't have the right tool in our hands. We can't fully trust at the end of the day that we've caught everything that we need to caught, that we've prioritized it, and that we're not going to let the ball drop. So here's the results: a loss of energy. See if anything's relate to you. All of these have been in my life at some point. Distracted. Have you ever caught yourself having a hard time focusing at work because you haven't captured all those inputs and they're just open loops in your mind, and you're working on something and all of a sudden something, that open loop comes around, it cycles around, and you stop and you think, oh, I got to capture that. You write it down on a piece of paper, but those other open loops just keep cycling. So you have a hard time focusing, a hard time staying on task. A loss of power. We become passive in our perspective. When we are not thriving, we can't stay there forever. And eventually we figure out how to thrive, or eventually we give up and we just live a defeated life. And that's what I mean by becoming passive, is we stop realizing that we have the ability, or I call it the power, to be active, to be proactive in our lives, to live kind of with intentionality and with purpose, and we become passive in our perspective. We can become demotivated. Many times, if we're overwhelmed by all of the inputs, if we're overwhelmed by our schedule, if we're overwhelmed by all the responsibility, and we're saying yes to too many things, we become demotivated. If we're not careful, we can even burn out. And then discouragement is connected to demotivation. Right? How many times have we been discouraged, either because we forgot a meeting, or because there's just so much to do and we're not following through, and people around us our teammates are starting to become frustrated because we're dropping balls, right? Discouragement comes. Loss of credibility, as I just talked about with our teammates. When we stop following through on those actionable items that we're responsible for from a meeting or from an email, when we stop following through, we ultimately lose credibility. And when we lose credibility, what we've lost is trust, and we've lost influence. And those things are hard to repair, right? Trust is extraordinarily easy to lose but hard to repair. And lastly is that we are underperformers. Our underperformance hurts us in our roles. It might mean that we get passed over for a promotion. It might mean that we don't get to exercise the fullness of our skills and our gifts because we've kind of locked ourselves in to being someone who doesn't follow through on our projects, or is constantly stressed out and overwhelmed. And so underperformance is another result that we don't want to do. Here's what I want to challenge you with and encourage you with, is if you'll change the rhythm of your week, you will change your week. If you will change the rhythm of your week, you will change your week. That's one of the big ideas. There's a few of them, but here's the first. Change change your week. Here's what I'm talking about when I talk about rhythm. I want to invite you to think about a planning that flows from a big vision down to the grind and the weeds, the daily. So, starting with a yearly plan every year, I want to encourage you and challenge you to make a yearly plan for your life and for your business, for your ministry, whatever field you're in. For us, we make ministry plans that plan out a year. And as I recognize, you don't have control over what's about to happen 6 months from now. But if you're not, it's not an excuse not to plan out a year. And so the farther you go, yes, the less likely that your plan is going to be right on target because life is so constantly changing. But take time to get clarity, to ask God, invite Him in, and to think deeply about where does the ministry need to go in the next year? Where's the church need to go? Where's this ministry area need to go in the next year? And then move from the yearly plan to what we call 6x8s, and I'll explain those in a minute. But those are bi-monthly 6 focuses that you are dialed in on over the course of 8 weeks. Move from 6x8s down to weekly planning. And so at the beginning of every week, develop a weekly plan and then execute that weekly plan daily. So every single day, you are creating and crafting a plan that is specific to that day. And then at the end of each week, you're reviewing, you're looking back, weekly review. So here's a picture that captures these steps of moving from vision, right? That yearly kind of here's why we exist, and here's the ministry plan or the business plan or for the next year, and then moving into those 6x8s, moving into the weekly plan, to the daily, and to the review. And here's my encouragement to you: if you find your rhythm when it comes to your planning, you will find your stride. If you find your rhythm, what you will discover is very quickly you will find your stride. Now, I'm not making any false promises in this time that we have together that it's that somehow you're going to get control of your world. You don't have control of your world. People are going to constantly come. There's going to be surprises. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be blindside things that there's going to be opportunities that you didn't see coming. But here's what I will promise you. If you're intentional and if you're purposeful about your planning, you're going to experience a greater joy, a greater peace, a greater confidence, and a greater effectiveness in your role. And not only are you, but your teams that you lead, they will experience that, and your coworkers will all experience the benefit of that. So life is still going to be chaotic, but what you're going to have is more clarity and more focus in the midst of chaos. So let's start with vision. Vision empowers us and refuels us and motivates us. When we have vision, we are empowered to lead. When we don't have clarity about where we're going and why it matters, then we are disempowered, right? We don't have the joy and the energy and the focus, the drive to go where we believe God has called us to go. So everything, all of our planning, it's got to start with vision. We have to get clarity around our life purpose and our ministry purpose and why we're here and what we're doing. And then we've got to drill down into that every single day. So everything starts with vision. Our yearly ministry plans, they've got to start with vision, and then we've got to learn to live from that vision. Make that yearly plan that I talked about, knowing that it will change. Plan your week from the vision, plan your day from the vision. It's always just got to be in our minds, much like driving down the highway. I don't know how fast you drive, but many of us are just kind of aware of police cars, aware of radar, even when we're focused in on a conversation and we're focused on the road. We always kind of have an antenna up for that. And that's why I want to encourage you to always have your antenna up for your vision. And when you're planning, whether we're talking about yearly, weekly, or daily, make sure that it's coming from your vision. The vision is the source. And obviously, you've got to get that straight with God. And then you plan from there, you execute from there. Start with the end in mind. If you haven't read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is an excellent book. And one of the chapter focuses is to how you start with the end in mind. You get clarity about the end, and then you work backwards so that you can get to that end, so you can get to that vision, believing that God has laid a vision and will lay a vision on your life and on your heart. Here's a tool that we use. It's called a leadership profile. If you'll notice up top, there's a place for a life mission statement. If you don't have clarity as to your own life kind of vision and purpose, this tool will help you. It also help you think about your ministry as well and your ministry purpose as well. So think about that. Make sure you have clarity over your ministry plan and your ministry in general. Here's bi-monthly then. So we move from the yearly planning down to the bi-monthly planning. This is what we call our 6x8s. 6x8s are six strategic focuses over the course of 8 weeks. Now, I've heard Bill Hybels call them 6x6s, and I'm not sure if he came up with the idea or if he's pulling off of someone else, but we just tweak them to be 6x8s. 6x8s are just a little bit cleaner. Just think of it 2 months at a time, right? So even if there's a month with 5 weeks in it, just make it 2 months at a time. What are your top six focuses over the next 2 months? Because you can do a lot of things, and there's going to be all kinds of inputs that are calling for your attention. There's going to be all kinds of good things that you can do. But here's something that's super important for us. It's really powerful. We've got to stop asking what's a good thing. We've got to ask what's the right thing for us to do. Is this the right thing? Am I the right person to focus on this? And we're always asking that question with an awareness of God, with awareness of His promptings, awareness of the ministry that He's called us to. But strategically, what are the six things over the course of the next 2 months that I must do? These are must accomplish things. So you might say, wow, I've got 10 of them. And of course, you're going to focus on those 10, but at the end of the day, if you could only accomplish six, what would they be? See, this helps take our yearly plan and move it into a 2 month plan. And so we start executing 2 months at a time, and that makes it manageable for remembering and keeping it in focus. And so here's my question for you as it relates to the bi-monthly planning, those 6x8s. Do you have clarity? And clarity is the key word around the top six focuses for your ministry leadership right now as the pastor of the church, as a ministry leader, as a department head, as a new employee, do you have clarity around the top six focuses for your ministry right now? Now, you might be on this as a volunteer, on this call as a volunteer leader. You're leading a ministry. The same as applies to you. It doesn't matter what role you have in the organization from top to bottom. It doesn't matter. This isn't not just applicable to church ministry. This is applicable to leadership in the business and in nonprofit world in general. This is applicable in every aspect of our life. Do we have clarity around those top things, those top focuses for our leadership? Here's a tool that we have at Multiply Leaders. It's a 6x8 monthly planner. You can see on the left the categories of the six focuses, and then with each category, there's a status. How do we define the success? What are the next steps? And then an update. How is it going? So this tool is included as a part of our personal ministry planner. Planning mistake number one, we're going to cover six of these planning mistakes. Here's the first one, is leading without clarity. I, as a pastor and as a ministry leader, I know how easy it is to just wake up and just lead every day, just respond to what's happening around us, and to not have real clarity about where you're headed. Now we have general clarity that Jesus called us to ministry to do good things and to for him to be glorified and to help other people. But man, we have lost the crystal clear clarity. And with that, what we end up losing is focus. And there are few things that are as powerful as focus in our life and in our leadership. For many of us, once we get clarity, the next key then is just to dial in our focus. That's what's helpful about six things instead of 15 things. Is yes, there may be more, but six are the six strategic focuses. That's about focusing our energy and our power and leveraging a clarity of focus around a few balls that we're going to seek to push down the field in Jesus' name. Let's continue our weekly plan. So we've looked at yearly kind of vision planning and ministry plan. Now we've moved it to 6x8s, and now we're on to our weekly plan. So we plan 2 months at a time, and then we plan to our week. Take a look at your week as a whole. Now you might be already doing this, or this might be a new thought for you. If you want to increase your clarity and increase your effectiveness as you're looking at your ministry, as you're thinking about how do I lead with greater effectiveness? How do I lead with less stress and more joy? If you take a look at your week as a whole, you're going to experience that. For me, I plan time on Monday mornings, but maybe for you, it's Sunday evenings. And I know every now and then I'll have a kind of a meeting that might be an emergency, move itself on Mondays at 9 a.m. That's when I plan my week is 9 to 10 a.m. on Monday mornings. I have it blocked out every single week, set in my calendar, and I just tell other around me this is when I'm planning my week. So for you, it might be Sunday evenings, it might be first thing Monday morning, but it needs to probably be one of those two times. You don't want to get into your day on Monday because other people will interrupt it. If you plan too early, you might be able to do yours on Saturday if you've got clarity. But for me, I know showing up as part of the worship gathering on Sunday morning, there's a lot of things that come out of that that I need to include in my weekly planning. So that's why I wait till either Sunday night or Monday mornings that I have blocked off. Here's a key: is let your coworkers know when you're planning your week. I know if you're like me, there's just constantly people in and out of your office. There's people who just want to chat, those who have a need, those who have a concern, those who I'm working on a project with. So you need to let others know when you're planning your week that, hey, during that time, I am going to be locked in, dialed in. I am not responding to my phone. I am not going to be open just to have a passing conversation at that time. Now, of course, there's going to be emergencies. So for you, the best thing you might be able to do, because emergencies you can't help, but you can help the interruptions, is if you keep finding your coworkers not honoring that boundary, is go find a quiet place in the building, whether it's your church, or go find, stop at a Starbucks on your way in, or the library if you're allowed to come in, if you have a little bit of flex time. If you need to be in your office right at 9, then just let your pastor or secretary know that you're in a quiet spot in the building for the next half an hour to hour, getting clarity around your week. If you can plan at the beginning of the week, it won't stop the chaos, but it will help you lead with greater clarity every single day. And there's a significant difference. It won't stop the chaos, but it will help you lead with greater clarity each day. If you don't take a look at your week as a whole, one of the results is I think that we feel constantly overwhelmed. We will feel constantly overwhelmed if we don't get a big picture. Because that big picture helps us then every single day dive down into the daily grind of leadership. And sometimes when we're in meetings that are back to back, or when a couple emergency situations arise, or other people are coming in with their agendas and our agenda kind of gets pushed aside, it's easy to kind of start to lose center, lose focus as to where we're going, as to the direction that we're heading, kind of lose north a little bit as a compass. And so getting that big picture really helps us to hold on to north in our week every day. After a few minutes, or I'm sorry, are a few minutes invested up front worth a greater payoff later on? That is a key question that we all have to think about. Because I know for me, for the longest time, I didn't plan the beginning of my week. I simply reacted. And I would go in, I'd actually plan meetings. First thing Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I'd have a meeting. And when that happens, if we didn't make our plan on Sunday nights, now we're into our week. And if you're like me as a ministry leader, as a business leader, an educational leader, whatever realm you're in, once your week starts, it just seems like somebody hits the gas pedal, and it's very hard to carve out time then. My week fills up very quickly with things that I need to do, and meetings and people and phone calls to respond to. Here's two tools that we utilize for planning the week and kind of staying organized during the week. The first tool, you see the vision there as we talked about, starting with vision. Then the 6 by 8. So what you do is you take your 6 by 8 tool and you're able to plug these into your weekly plan underneath those prioritized projects. Those prioritized projects should match up to your current 6 by 8s, and you can see every week planning your next action step. Now, your 6 by 8s there go into consideration with your urgent focuses. So, an urgent focus is something that somebody else has planned for us. A phone call of, hey, I need some counseling, I need to talk to you, or a hospital visit, or a ministry thing that I would like, someone else wants to do. In essence, urgent focuses are not your agenda, but they're someone else's agenda. Now, be very clear. That might be exactly what God wants you to prioritize in that day. But for too many of us, we don't even think or ask that question about God's leadership. What we end up doing is letting the urgent crowd out the 6 by 8s and crowd out our agendas without even thought given to them. We just let everyone else shape the agenda of our days without any kind of thought or reflection about. Now, there will be many times where you need to let someone else's agenda have greater priority than your agenda. But there's a danger, especially if you're a people pleaser, and letting someone else's agenda constantly take over your agenda. That will keep you from getting things done. That will make you work longer hours, keep you from being as productive in the hours that you are working, and that will result in frustration at home, probably greater likelihood of burnout and a less satisfaction in your role. So we move from 6x8 to urgent focuses. Then we have to discern what is our energy focus for this week. What are our high energy focuses? What are our medium energy focuses? And what are our low energy focuses? So we take those 6x8 action steps and those urgent focuses, we sort that out, and then we line it up in that energy focus area. And then I just include that delegation matrix because I know for me, I tend towards doing. So I need to be real intentional about thinking who can I invite or empower to be a part of this. And so just thinking through, here's the high energy focuses. Who can I invite or empower to be a part of that? Here's my medium energy focuses. Who can I invite or empower to be a part of that? And then our weekly planner project is just another tool that we include that matches up with the 6x8 focuses. It matches up for 6 spots to kind of keep track of those notes and keep that going. Now we're on to our daily plan. We move from the yearly to the 6x8 to the weekly to the daily. And here's my encouragement to you. I've already said this, but I just want to be very explicit, is be dependent and open to God's leading. Now we could do a whole webinar on what that looks like and how you do that. But for those of us on this call, I just want to encourage you to not let ministry become a greater love in your life than Jesus himself. I have found myself in that place so many times. It's a constant danger in my life where ministry becomes greater. And oddly enough, this is possible, and Jesus becomes less. And we fall more in love and make an idol out of ministry. Our hope becomes that, and how others approve of us or our accomplishment. And somehow, even though Jesus is supposed to be the center of it, he becomes diminished. And he's not greatest in our hearts and our minds and our focuses. So in our daily plan, be dependent and be open to God's leading. Because when Jesus is greater in our life and we're listening for the voice of God and we're dependent on His power, then we're gonna catch those moments where God prompts us to prioritize something or to give someone a call that's not on our radar, it's not in our strategic plan that we've already tried to discern and have an open ear to God. We're gonna catch that. But start by prioritizing in your day your top 3 to 4 focuses to accomplish. So we're dependent. I'd encourage you every morning to make sure that the rhythm in your morning is going to launch you into your day. So you're spending time kind of dialing into your identity, spending time dialing in to God being the greatest in your life and your dependency on Him, and then getting clarity, whether it's before you leave the house if you need to do it, or once you're in the office and you've got to sort that out if you have a spouse, with your spouse, and just with your work hours and your rhythm. But start by prioritizing the top 3 to 4 focuses to accomplish. I know for me, many times I end up prioritizing 5 to 7 focuses, and honestly, I never accomplish all 7 of them. I constantly am pushing those focuses onto the next day. Realistically, and if your ministry is like mine, I have people constantly coming to ask me a question or have a problem that they need to talk to me about. So I really need to make sure that I have 3 to 4 max focuses, priorities to accomplish in that day. And we've already talked about distinguishing between your focuses and the urgent. And if you're familiar with the language of planning, you might think of important versus the urgent. I chose not to use that word important just because I think sometimes, if you haven't heard it before, it seems to devalue people. It seems to devalue other people's agendas and who other people are. And that's not what I want to do. So I just distinguish between your agenda and the urgent agendas of others around you. Now, urgent doesn't mean necessarily that it's an emergency. It just means to them it's an immediate thing they want you to focus on. Capture every action item for follow-up in one place. If you're not currently doing this and you just start doing this, it will be worth this webinar to take every action item from your day and to capture it in one place. If you will just simply do that, it will empower you with greater clarity, more peace, more energy, and you will be more effective in your role. So prioritize 3 to 4, capture every action item in your day for follow up in the same place. That is so important because as we get to our week in review in just a moment, you look back and you can look through your week and see those action items. Take 15 to 30 minutes to get clarity on your priorities and plan every single morning. Make sure that you are planning daily. So we plan, you can see that flow. We plan weekly and then we plan every single day to revisit that and make sure we're leading and living with clarity. And then review the previous daily plan and follow up those actions if you didn't complete them. I would encourage you to build in some time at the end of each day to just follow through on your action items. So don't plan a meeting during the last 30 minutes of your day, but instead just build that time. knowing that you're going to have actionable items, you're going to have things that you're called to follow through on to make sure that you're building time for that. So build that rhythm into your actual schedule. Here's our daily planner tool. You see the meeting notes on the left, the urgent up top. So we have to place to capture those urgent agendas of other people. A daily schedule. I know many of us use electronic schedules, but if you don't, there's a daily schedule there. And then daily prioritized to-dos on the right there in the middle. That's where I prioritize my top 3 to 4, and then follow up from the day is right below that. So it doesn't matter what meeting I'm in, if there's an actionable item, I don't put it under meeting notes, I put it under follow up from today. And what that enables me to do is when I'm in my weekly review, it enables me to flip through my week, look through all of my follow up action items, and to see whether I completed them all or not, to catch something that I might have missed. Planning mistake number 2 is not capturing everything in one place. If you're using multiple systems, notepads and sticky notes and a planner, and if you're using multiple planners, journals, multiple journals, if you're not capturing everything in one place, ultimately it's going to catch up to you in your organization. It's going to keep open loops in your mind, and you're going to drop the ball. You're going to miss things, and that's going to hurt your credibility. It's going to hurt your effectiveness. So make sure you're capturing everything, whatever tool you use, whatever works for you. It's important that it's unique to you. Whatever tool that is, capturing it in one place. Planning mistake number 3 is that we plan too much. And I have been guilty of this constantly in my ministry leadership over time, is I plan too many priorities and too many meetings. I want to do too much. And part of this is being driven by we're always driven by a mix of motivation. And so for me, part of that is there's probably an unhealthy motivation that's mixed in with a healthy one, and that drives me to plan too much. I enjoy ministry. I enjoy the calling that God has given me many times. But I can plan too many priorities and too many meetings and really just not pay attention to my own boundaries. And that leads into burnout. Not paying attention to our boundaries will cut us out of the race, and we will not finish in ministry if we don't learn to pay attention to our boundaries. So we can only say yes to so many things. So what are those priorities and what are those meetings? Do you know how many meetings you can handle in a typical day? And do you adjust when you overplan one day for the next day to have a little bit more time of reflection and resting? Review weekly. Here's the last step in the planning process. Starts with the yearly plan and moves through the 6x8s down to the weekly and then to the daily. And now we're at the review weekly. We're almost done. Reviewing fuels growth. Right? When we review our week, we learn, and when we learn, we grow. Reviewing gives space for God to nudge us. Too many times in ministry leadership, we just lead at such a high paced speed that we really aren't able to listen to what God would have to say to us and to nudge us and to listen for his whisper. So reviewing provides a space for God to really nudge us, to impress something on our heart. Reviewing keeps you from missing important follow-up. As I said before, when you capture all of your action items and your prioritized to-do list in one place, one category in your day, that enables you to flip back through your week and just look at a glance and say, oh, I didn't scratch that off, I didn't mark that off, and I didn't move it, I must have missed it. So it keeps you from missing important responsibilities, important follow through. Here's my encouragement to you. Set a time to review your week and reflect every Friday or Saturday. Now, it's possible to do it on Sunday. It's possible to reflect and then follow that reflecting with planning of the next week. And in fact, sometimes while it's fresh, that's what works best. I tend to do that. I tend to reflect on Sunday nights and then plan the next week right after that, if I'm not planning it on Monday mornings. But I tend to reflect on Sunday nights just because of my rhythm. I take off Fridays during the day, and Saturdays I'm spending time with family and getting ready for what's about to happen at the worship gathering on Sunday. Ask questions like, where was God present? What did I learn? What mistakes did I make in how I plan my week? Who do I need to follow up with from my week? Those are key questions. And on this next page, here's the week in review form that we created at Multiply Leaders. You can see questions like what can you celebrate from this week, to what did you struggle with and what did you learn from the week. So just some key questions. Identify what your key questions are and ask those key questions at the end of your week. Maybe spend even 15 minutes to 30 minutes just reflecting and reviewing your week and inviting God to lead you in action. Planning mistake number 4 is living reactive to life instead of being proactive with your schedule and time. And I think this is such a significant shift. If we can learn to flip this around and instead of living reactive, meaning we are passive and we let everyone else set the agenda of our life, we're passive in that we don't think we have much power to carve out the life that we desire. If we're living reactive to life, that's gonna, in the long run, gonna lead us frustrated, gonna lead us tired, gonna lead us burned out. If we can flip that around and lead with proactiveness, we're gonna lead with greater energy, with greater clarity, with a greater empowerment, and everyone around us is it's gonna trickle to them. It's gonna trickle over. So proactive means that we're intentional and purposeful with our time, that we start with vision, and that we are aware that there's going to be surprises every day. There's going to be God moments in our day where God has something that He's going to nudge in our heart, possibly. But we also are aware that we can plan our weeks and invite God into that and be very purposeful in how we spend our time and be more fruitful and effective in our roles. Planning mistake number 5 is this, is leading without an awareness of how you sabotage yourself. Now, this one I would love to spend more time on, but we only have a few more minutes left. And so I just want to just touch on this. Leading without awareness is dangerous, and we all have blind spots. And that's why we need to invite others to speak into our leadership. But are you aware of who you are, what your gifts are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how you sabotage yourself? What does that mean to sabotage yourself? Here's my premise is that we are all sabotaging ourselves in some fashion and likely in multiple ways. And when it comes to planning our weeks, we're sabotaging ourselves by not planning or by not reflecting or by not being disciplined and to execute what we did plan, right? Or we sabotage ourselves in that we don't do the hard thing that we need to do because internally, emotionally, we're feeling fear, we're feeling insecurity, and so we don't follow through or make the phone call that we need to make, and we put that off all day, and we just carry that fear, that insecurity with us throughout the day. How are you sabotaging yourself? This is a great question. If you want to pause it and think or come back later, write that question down and think about how am I sabotaging myself? Because if we can get awareness around that, we can start to counterbalance those things. We can start to see some growth and invite God to bring in those areas. There's a review, moving from vision to 6x8s to weekly plan to daily plan to weekend review. And when we find our rhythm, we our stride. Lastly, planning mistake number 6 is trying to do everything we've showed you at once from today's webinar. I've moved quick. There's a lot of things. I've given you a lot of information. It's going to be overwhelming to try to do all of those things. We would love to come alongside of you and help you as a coach and as you're seeking to maximize your weekly rhythm and your weekly effectiveness. But here's what I want to encourage you with is just to make small changes. If you'll make small changes, you will see growth in your life. Don't be overwhelmed by trying to do everything, because if you will, you're going to fail. And you're just going to stop doing all of it. You're not going to implement any of it. But if you'll just make a few small changes, maybe just one change from today's webinar, you will take a step towards increasing and unlocking your potential. And to do that, you need other people around you. So planning mistake number 7 is making those changes alone. Don't do it. Don't walk away from this moment, from this learning, from this webinar, from whatever it is that's resonating with you and think, I'm just going to try and do this on my own. Invite a friend in, invite a peer, invite a coach or a supervisor, depending on your situation, into whatever shifts you need to make to get the friction around you that you need to have. So that accountability, that encouragement, just knowing that someone's going to ask you that question in of itself is a powerful catalyst for shifting, but also to have that person there to encourage you and celebrate with you is also powerful. So it's been my pleasure to spend the time with you. I trust that God has this has been a fruitful time for you. There's a few things that might have been impressed on your heart or you've realized through our time. I would encourage you to visit multiplyleaders.org. That's our site, and on there there's a weekly planning tab on the right hand side. If you click on that, it'll take you to the tool that we showed you in spread throughout those different planners that we have. There's a combined planner that you can purchase from us. And if you follow us and subscribe to our email list, sometimes we give it away for free. So if you will follow us and subscribe, eventually you will likely get it for free, but you can purchase it if you want to purchase those tools today. I'm not doing this just so you'll purchase those tools from us. I want you to use whatever system that is going to make you effective. I want you to unlock your potential, and I want to see that unlocked in you in the name of Jesus. Because I want to believe in what God's doing in the lives of leaders and ultimately in and through those leaders in the community and in the world for His glory and of others. So here's a final thought from us is in Jesus, you're covered in the grace of God. You are empowered with the Holy Spirit. You are called for His purposes. God will never leave you, and He will finish what He started in you. In Jesus, the best is yet to come. I hope you believe that. It doesn't mean there's not going to be trials. It doesn't mean you might not be in the middle of a tough season of leadership where you feel like throwing in the towel. It might not mean that you're in a season where you're burnt out and you have a trouble believing that you can ever get back to where you were before. But I really believe I've experienced those seasons myself in Jesus. The best is yet to come. And I promise as we look to Revelation and to the fullness of God's word, and that we can leave with hope because of that. So two questions. What change will you commit to make from something that resonated with you today? Take one thing, implement it in your life, and that will be worth the time that you spent here. Who will you invite to join you in the process to get friction? If we invite someone, the likelihood will go up significantly that we will actually see real change, real friction happen that causes transformation. So just thinking about right now, who can you invite to say, hey, will you check in with me every Monday and make sure I planned my week? Hey, will you check in with me every weekend and just send me a text or let's have a conversation at some point? Who can you invite? We're here, coach. We can help you with that. Thank you for your time. We know it's valuable. I hope that this has been valuable. I trust it has been. Weekly planning for ministry leaders, finding clarity in the chaos of ministry.